Well, I got a comment on a video asking for some details on how I did this carburetor swap. This is my 88 F-150. It's got a 302 and a C6 automatic in it. This is pretty easy to do if you've got a stick shift truck or something with an old hydraulically controlled automatic like a C6. If you've got the later E4OD or the electronic transmissions, then you gotta figure out a way to make the computer work to still make the transmission shift. But on these older trucks, the C6 or stick shift, there's no computer controls, so you can completely wipe out the computer systems in these trucks. Put a carburetor on them. So with the 302, it's pretty simple because you can use any intake off a 289 or any 302. On eBay, I think they're like $130 for the Chinese knockoff aluminum intakes now. They're pretty cheap. If it's in a truck, I would stick with a dual plane because a 302 doesn't make a ton of torque. It was designed for a Mustang. So in a full-size truck application, the dual plane intake will help out in the torque department. So you need an intake. You obviously need a carburetor. I run a Edelbrock or a Carter AFB because I live up north. And Holleys are great, but they're pretty sensitive to the weather. So, especially here in Idaho, every 5 minutes the air temperature and the moisture and the humidity and all that change, and Holleys are pretty sensitive to it, and they'll do weird things and ice up. But with this Edelbrock, I stuck it on, I tuned it, and I haven't had the hood up on this truck in a year or two. It's been a daily driver. The only time I ever have to pop the hood is to check fluids once in a while, but it's been dead reliable. Obviously you can see how dirty it is. I don't get in here much. So you need an intake, a carburetor, and you're going to need a distributor. Personally, I use points distributors for the most part. This one I decided to try out a DuraSpark setup, but either way you just need a distributor that you can run standalone, so either points or with this DuraSpark setup it's pretty simple to wire in. You just need one of these boxes and a DuraSpark distributor. One thing to note, when you switch over to DuraSpark or points, it uses this style cap which has female ends on it, and your original EFI distributor is going to have male ends on it like an HEI. So if you use one of these and not the aftermarket HEI type Ford distributors, you're going to need different spark plug wires as well when you get your distributor, so keep that in mind. You're going to need a throttle cable bracket. This one I think I got off a van and modified a little bit, but you need the bracket for the carbureted intake, and then you're going to need a shorter throttle cable because the original EFI one is 3 miles long. So I want to say it was ATP brand cables, have the metal ends on them. One of them had plastic ends and they're garbage, they like to fall off, so find one with a metal end on it would be my recommendation. And as far as the wiring, I took a factory harness out of the junkyard, just an extra one. That way I could keep my original one intact, just for reference. And then I went and got a pin out of the original computer plug, which is pretty much year specific, so you got to find one for your exact truck with your engine and transmission and all that. And I just went through the schematic, looked at the pinout diagram, and I cut out all the wires that I didn't need, which was basically all of the engine wires. I think I left 3 of them, and then I added 4 in for the DuraSpark setup, just because that's what I decided to run for the distributor. But just a couple wires that you need to leave in there to run the ignition system. You're going to need a coil, canister type coil. A lot of the ones nowadays have the resistors built in, but you got to pay attention whether or not it needs a resistor when you wire power to it. Some of them you have to have the ballast resistor, and a full 12 volts will melt them down. So I think if you get the 70s ones, usually they already have the resistor built in. They're designed for a full 12 volts. But you need the coil. And then as far as the fuel system goes, this is a Holley part number 12-881 bypass style fuel pressure regulator. you need a bypass style, not the cheaper $30 ones. These are like 90 bucks, but this allows you to use the factory fuel pump setup. I've done quite a few of these EFI conversions, and I've done them all this same way, and they work great. I just leave all the factory EFI fuel pumps in it, the high pressure 40 psi fuel pump. I leave it all in there, and then I run this bypass regulator to turn it down to 6 psi for the carburetor. So these are marked which line goes where. I take factory fuel rails and cut the ends off so that the factory quick connect still quick connects, so you don't have to modify the fuel line on the truck itself. I don't know if we can see back in here, but there's the factory connector. I just got a junk set of fuel rails, cut the ends off and flared them so that the hose will go on the end, and then I hooked that into the factory quick connect to the original fuel rails in the truck. And then this regulator turns that down to 6 pounds for the carburetor. One thing to note, you do want to use high pressure fuel hose that's fuel injection rated, because you're running the factory 40 psi pump through the regulator. So your high pressure side is going to be higher than what your carbureted hose is going to be rated at. So you want the expensive hose on that side of it at least. And then on the outlet you can run the cheaper hose if you wanted to, because that's only going to be 6 pounds to the carburetor. And then to make the fuel pumps work, a lot of people will jump the relay and just run the fuel pump all the time by bypassing the relay. What I like to do is, when I strip the harness, if I can even find the connector here, here it is, I leave this EEC test plug in here. Since we've got this wonderful lighting, I leave the EEC test plug intact on the harness. And then this pin, if you can get a look here at how this is orientated, that pin right there is your fuel pump test terminal. So this is designed to be able to run the fuel pump with the engine off when you're diagnosing problems. You ground that and then it kicks the pumps on. Then you can test your fuel pressure and all that. Well, with doing this, you ground this pin. I just permanently grounded this wire. Ground that pin, and the power to the pumps will be running through the factory inertia switch that's in these trucks. Now, I am not a safety guy, but if you roll the truck with a carburetor, the bowl vents are going to be gushing fuel out, and if the inertia switch isn't there to cut the fuel pumps off, it's just going to keep flooding gas everywhere and probably catch on fire. So since it's already in there, you may as well keep it working. So if you jump the relay, then you're bypassing the inertia switch. But if you just ground that plug, that pin on the plug, you're grounding the factory system that runs power through the inertia switch. And then you don't even have to touch the relay. So that's the easiest way to do it that I've found. It works great, and I've had no issues with it. You're also going to need an air cleaner and little stuff like that. Throttle return springs, stuff that might come in a carburetor kit if you buy a new carburetor. But other than that, it's a pretty straightforward swap. I did this one in some random parking lot over a weekend, and I had it running by the end of the weekend. Pretty straightforward. Honestly, the hardest part is getting all the EFI crap off. There's a lot of hidden bolts, but once you get all the intake manifold off, it's pretty straightforward. So, and as far as it goes, once you get it tuned up, this thing's been dead reliable for quite a few years now. It's been my daily driver, and the EFI kept trying to leave me stranded. So to me, this was a very beneficial swap. So it's been running. We'll fire it up. Been running errands today, if I can find my keys. That's on a hot start. but that starts faster than EFI.